Nights in the shelter, night after night. It was impossible to sleep through the explosions and the gunfire. Susan had a flashlight, but flashlights needed batteries, and batteries were hard to find. Instead, she lit a candle inside a flower pot, and by its dim light, read to us. Peter Pan, A Secret Garden, The Wind in the Willows. Some were books she got from the library, others came from her own bookshelves. On his own, Jamie was reading Swiss Family Robinson over again. "We're like them," he said one night, as the candlelit flickered off the shelter's tin walls. "We're in our cave, safe and warm." I shuddered. I had wrapped myself in a sheet because it was too hot for a blanket. I felt warm, but not safe. I never felt safe in the shelter. You are though," Susan said. "You feel safer in your bedroom, but you're actually much safer in the shelter." It didn't matter how I felt. She made me go into the shelter every time the sirens wailed. Men came and removed all the signposts from the roads around the village so that when Hitler invaded, he wouldn't know where he was. When he invaded, we were to bury our radio. Jamie had already dug a hole for it in the garden. When Hitler invaded, we were to say nothing, do nothing to help the enemy. If he invaded while I was out riding, I was to return home at once, as fast as possible by the shortest route. I'd know it was an invasion, not an air raid, because all the church bells would ring. "What if the Germans take butter?" I asked Susan. "They won't," she said, but I was sure she was lying. "Bloody Huns," Fred muttered when I went to help with the chores. "They come here, I'll stab them with a pitchfork, I will." Fred was not happy. The riding horses, the Thorntons' fine hunters, were all out to grass, and the grass was good, but the hayfields had been turned over to wheat, and Fred didn't know how he'd feed the horses through the winter. Plus, the land girls staying in the loft annoyed him. "Work 12 hours a day, then go out dancing," he said. "Bunch of lightfoots. In my day, girls didn't act like that." I thought the land girls seemed friendly, but I knew better than to say so to Fred. You could get used to anything. After a few weeks, I didn't panic when I went into the shelter. I quit worrying about the invasion. I put Jamie up behind me on butter, and we searched the fields for shrapnel or bullets or bombs. Once we came across an airplane shot down in a hops field. Soldiers had already surrounded it by the time we got there and were keeping civilians away. "A Messerschmitt," Jamie said, eyes gleaming. "Wonder where the pilot went." The pilot had bailed out. The plane's canopy was open. "Caught him," one of the soldiers said, overhearing. "Prisoner of war. No troubles." One day in early August, Susan went to a WVS meeting. Jamie was tending the garden. He loved it. And I took off on butter for my daily ride. I went to the top of the hill. I paused, the way I always did, to search the sea and the sky. No airplanes, no big boats. But then I saw something in the distance, something small on the surface of the ocean. A tiny boat, a rowboat, pulling for shore. I watched it, wondering. It was headed not for the town harbor, but for one of the barbed wire sections of the beach. Was the person lost? Surely he knew better than to land where there could be mines. I kept watching, frowning. The man, it looked like a man, I thought, in the boat, continued to row straight for shore. Surely he could see the village from the water. Surely he knew it would be safer there. Unless, I thought, my blood running cold, he was a spy. A spy! I couldn't believe it. I didn't believe it. I always looked for spies from the hill. It was a habit. But that didn't mean, despite the posters, despite the rumors, that I actually expected to ever see a spy. But yet, a single rowboat, so far out, where had he come from? Did he get dropped off by a submarine? A German submarine? If he wasn't a spy, why was he headed toward the deserted beach? I heard Susan's voice in my head. Improbable, it said. That meant not likely. Still, it was one of the rules. Report anything suspicious at once. I turned butter down the face of the hill, weaving through brush and tall grass, trying to keep the little boat in sight. It disappeared from my view as I got lower, and I sped up, cantering along the road that led to the barricaded beach. I stopped butter in a copse of trees just as the beach came into view. It was low tide, and the sand stretched out wide and flat for a mile along the shoreline. Right in the center of the sand, the man stepped from his rowboat. He carried a suitcase and had a rucksack on his back. As I watched, he shoved the rowboat back into the water. The sea was quiet. The boat floated high above the gentle waves and began to drift sideways, following the shore. I swallowed hard. The man, an ordinary-looking man, at least from the distance, took something from his rucksack. He unfolded it and used whatever it was to dig a hole in the beach. He put the suitcase into the hole, covered the hole with sand, walked cautiously up the sand dunes toward the barbed wire. I couldn't see what happened next, but suddenly the man was on the other side of the fence, walking down the road toward me. I turned butter and galloped away. I could have gone to the airfield, but the police station was closer, and I knew where it was. Near the school, near the shop where I'd had tea. I kept butter to a canter, even over the cobblestoned main street. I pulled him to a halt at the station, wrapped his reins around the handrail, and hurried up the steps as best as I could. I didn't have my crutches. "I think I found a spy," I said to the first person I saw, a portly man seated behind a large wooden desk. "A spy on the beach." The portly man turned toward me. "Get a hold of yourself, miss," he said. "I can't understand you the way you're gabbling." I grabbed the edge of his desk for balance. I repeated my words. The man looked me up and down, particularly down at my bad foot and its odd homemade shoe. I fought the urge to hide it. "How was it you saw this spy?" he asked. He had a little smile on his face. I realized he did not believe me. "I was out on my pony," I began. I told the whole story, the hill where I always kept a lookout, the little boat, the suitcase buried in the sand. "On your pony," the man said, nodding, his smile widening into a smirk. "Watch a lot of newsreels, do you? Listen to the scary stories on the radio?" He thought I was lying, or at best, exaggerating, and now he was staring at my bad foot again. I felt a wave of heat climb up my neck. I thought of what Susan would do. I drew myself up, taller, and glared at the man, and I said, "My bad foot's a long way from my brain." The man blinked. I said, "I would like to speak to your commanding officer. The government asks us to report anything suspicious, and that's what I'm going to do. If you won't listen, I want to talk to someone who will." The second police officer took me more seriously. "We'll go in the squad car," he said, "see if we can find him." He asked if I needed help getting to the car. "No, thank you," I said. I walked as straight as I could manage, even though it hurt like crazy. The officer put me in the front seat beside him, and together we started down the road. We'd hardly gotten out of town when we came across the man I'd seen, walking down the road with perfect ease. I pointed him out to the officer. "You're sure?" the officer asked. For a moment, I wasn't. I hadn't really gotten a close look at the man's face, but he felt like the right person. I nodded. The officer stopped his car and got out. "Papers, please," he said. "Really?" said the man in perfect English with the accent Lady Thornton used. "Why ever for?" "Routine," the officer said. The man raised his eyebrow as if it were all a joke, but reached into his pocket readily enough. He pulled his identity card out of a battered leather wallet. "I'm just on a bit of a walking holiday," he said, indicating the rucksack on his back. "My ration card's in there if you want me to fish it out." He could not sound more English. He could not look more English. And yet... "Sir," I said to the officer. He came over to the window on the passenger side and leaned in. "I'm sorry, miss," he said, shaking his head, "but I think you've..." I said, "His trouser cuffs are wet. And they're full of sand." No one went on the beaches anymore. No one, ever. It wasn't allowed. The officer's smile disappeared. For a moment, I thought he was angry with me, but I was wrong. The next thing I knew, the man from the beach was handcuffed and bundled into the back of the car. He protested vehemently in his perfect English voice. Back at the station, patient Butter still stood tied to the porch rail. The officer told me to go on home. "We'll handle it from here, miss." I wanted to tell Susan, but I wasn't sure how. I put it off so that I could think about it more. We were halfway through dinner that evening when the police knocked on the door. It was my second officer and another. "We need to speak with your daughter, ma'am." I got up quickly. Susan looked stunned. Jamie looked delighted. "We need you to help us locate the buried parcel," my officer said. So I went again in a squad car, this time all the way to the beach. I showed them where I'd stood with Butter, watching, and I tried to show them where I thought the man had landed with his boat. The tide was high now, and everything looked different. "We'll have to get the army to dig it up anyhow," the other officer said. "For all we know, the beach is mined." He drove along the edge of the barbed wire fence. We got out near where I thought the man had gone through, and walked up and down the road until we found a footprint. The officer marked it with a piece of cloth tied to the fence, and then took me home. I paused before I got out of the car. "Will you let me know what happens to the man?" The officers shook their heads. "It'll be a secret, miss." "Will you let me know if he really is a spy?" They looked at each other and nodded. "But you're to stay quiet about it," one said. I nodded. "Loose lips sink ships," I said. I went in to make my explanations to Susan. She was waiting for me on the purple sofa. She listened to the whole story. Then she put her hands on either side of my face. She smiled at me, and she said, "Oh, Ada, I am so proud." The very next afternoon, someone knocked on our door again. It was a police officer, not the one who had helped me, but the fat one who had sat at his desk and thought I was making things up. "I need to apologize to your daughter, ma'am," he said. When he saw me, he swept off his hat and bowed. "I should have believed you," he said. "I'm sorry. A grateful nation thanks you for your service." With great ceremony, he handed me an onion.